Hello, greetings. I want to talk about, the state of publishing in the world today. I've been involved in publishing for a long time. I began by publishing a magazine called Inspiration in 2004. Then I used that same company that was publishing my magazine to publish some of my books. And then subsequently, I began receiving manuscripts from other authors, and so I published their books as well. So I've published my own books as well as books of many other authors, including some famous ones, but I won't go into names today. All right, but Kisana Publishers is it's a big publishing company now, or it's getting big because we published some of the most prominent people in this country. And I want to talk about the sort of publishing because I read a piece, on X, an article written by Nigerian writer John Elnathan, in which he revealed that this year his earnings from royalties, the amount of money that his publishers have sent him for the 6 books that they have published, added up to 500 and something, just about $500. And he added that the money that he has got from Substack, where he has 15 paying subscribers, is greater than the money that he has got as royalties from his publishers. It obviously is, a very sobering fact. It set so many people on X wondering how that could be, how somebody can possibly survive on $500 for a whole year. And it is an interesting thing. It's, because Elnathan John is not some obscure writer. He's a writer who has won an international award. He's internationally known. His books, should be selling very many copies. But he says that altogether they have sold 1,000. All the 6 books have sold altogether about 1,000 copies, and he has got $500, about $50 for each copy that has been sold. So, because I'm a publisher, because I publish my own books, I find that the money that I get from my books, which, they are mostly sold within Uganda. There's some copies on Amazon, all right, but my sales are confined within Uganda, which is a small country, especially in terms of literature. Uganda is a very small country. But the money that I get from sales, is comparable to the money that Elnathan gets from his sales, from his royalties rather. And yet his books are sold all over the world, and he's much more famous than I am. Yeah, but then because he gets royalties, a tiny fraction of the sales, and I get a much higher fraction because I'm the publisher. You find that somehow we end up getting around about the same amount of money from books. But even when I'm a publisher, of course, part of the reason, of course, why my sales are limited to Uganda is that I'm the publisher. If I had a publisher in UK or in the States, maybe I would be selling many more copies. But then again, that publisher would give me just royalties, and I would end up getting even less than Elnathan gets, because I'm not as famous as Elnathan. So I would even get much less than he does get. So that is, those are some of the things in the publishing world. The publisher will get his cuts, and He will sell you, he will get your books known, but at the same time, the cut, the fraction of the sale that he will give you will be very small. As you can see, in the case of El Nathan, you're talking about half a dollar for each book. That is a very small fraction of the sales. Because even if you say that a copy of the book costs $10, still half a dollar is just about 5%. So that is basically the nature of the industry. Someone publishes your book, they will give you a small cut of the sales. And so that is it. You cannot survive on book sales, whether you are an internationally renowned writer or you're confined to your country the way I am. You find it very difficult to survive on books, because what can $500 do for you? Even if you're living in Uganda, $500 will not do much for you. You maybe just manage to pay rent if you're living in in a downscale neighborhood, but that's it. If you just pay rent, then what are you going to eat? What are you going to put on? It's all very complicated. Being a writer is a tough thing. It's really tough. And I can count myself lucky, because even getting $500 from books in Uganda, selling, let's say in my case, to get $500, I need to sell about 200 copies, which I can do, but it's not something that is guaranteed. There are very many authors in my country who struggle to even sell 10 copies in a year. 10 copies in a year. They struggle to do that. So that is how bad it is. Like in my case, the fact that I can sell 200 copies, I count that as luck. I count that as good fortune. So the book industry is that bad. But the fact that someone like El Nathan gets better earnings from Substack, it just reminds me of a post that I wrote on Facebook about 15 years ago. In that post, I mentioned first that the novel as a literary form reached its zenith, its highest point, in the 19th century. Since the 20th century, since the advent of television, the novel has been in decline. And I also mentioned that the literary form that's going to be dominant, that's going to be more successful in the 21st century is the short essay. So El Nathan's revelation somehow corroborates that post, because Substack, what he writes on Substack, they're short essays. And the books which are frustrating him, which are doing poorly, they are novels mostly. So the novel has been in decline since the advent of TV. And that is because television basically shaped people's expectations of even the other forms of entertainment, even the other forms of art. They expected them to match television in giving them immediate satisfaction, giving them quick gratification. And so when you think about it, in the 19th century, the most popular novelists were people like Charles Dickens, people like Dostoevsky, people like Thomas Hardy, Oscar Wilde. Those were the popular writers of the 19th century. They were writing books that had depth, books that had, were intellectually stimulating. But when you come to the 20th century, you find that the most popular novelists were people like Agatha Christie, people like Barbara Cartland, people like Sidney Sheldon, Jeffrey Archer, you know, and publishing houses like Mills and Bourne. They were doing so well. They were the best-selling authors and publishers of the 20th century. We still had people writing literary fiction, people writing the intellectually stimulating fiction similar to the 20th century. We had people like Harper Lee, people like George Orwell, people like Graham Greene, people like who's this woman? But we had Coetzee. There were so many people, even Africans like Kino Akebe, Nguga Thiong'o, Nadine Gordimer. We had authors who were Golding, yes, William Golding, people like that. They were writing powerful stuff that had intellectual depth, stuff that was comparable to the books of Tolstoy, and not maybe to the same level, not as good maybe, but which were comparable to the 19th century books by the likes of Tolstoy, Thomas Hardy, Dostoevsky, the Bronte sisters, Jane Austen, Victor Hugo, Alexander Dumas, Mark Twain. Those are the giants of the 19th century. So in the 20th century, we still had a few giants, who wrote books like those. We had people like F. Scott Fitzgerald, people like the Green and the Golding and the Orwells, the Chinua Achebe that I've just talked about. But these 20th century writers written fiction didn't sell as many copies as the likes of Barbara Cartland, Agatha Christie, and Sidney Sheldon and Jeffrey Archer. So we can say that the dominant literary form of the 20th century was what is called popular fiction as opposed to literary fiction. It was this fiction that just gives instant gratification but does not really stimulate the mind, does not make one think deeply. That is what happened to fiction in the 20th century. And it is perhaps not a coincidence that one of the stars of 20th century fiction, Sidney Sheldon, was in television, worked in television for 20 years as a writer of sitcoms and telenovelas. He was a writer of such television programs before he switched to the writing of fiction. So one could say that experience in television prepared him to be a superstar in fiction, because fiction had evolved. The people's tastes in fiction had evolved, and what had been a great influence, one of the great influences in that evolution had been television. And so when he brought that mind that he had developed as a writer of television programs to the writing of fiction, he became a great success. So in our time, social media and smartphones generally, they have dethroned television. Now people they spend more time reading, seeing things with their smartphones than they spend on TV. And this has again had an impact on the sort of literary art that is consumed. Now, 19th century fiction, that kind of fiction of Tolstoy, I mean, someone can write that, but to be able to make it commercially successful in our time, to be able to live on that kind of fiction, the way the likes of Dickens and Oscar Wilde lived on it, it is not possible in our time. It's possible, very unlikely that anybody will write that kind of book, that kind of literature, and be able to live on it. It is very difficult in our time. And then even the books of the kind of books that became popular in the 20th century. The books of the Sidney Sheldon, Jeffrey Archer kind of book, popular fiction. Even that kind of fiction, the kind of attention span that it requires, it's very rare in our time, because even though it's light, it doesn't put too much stress on the head, it also requires concentration. It requires someone to devote a large chunk of time to it. And that chunk of time is hard to come by in our time. And so even that kind of fiction that became popular in the 20th century, even the Mills and Bone length kind of fiction, it is difficult to commercially sustain in our time. And so what we have in this time, what is popular, what is likely to succeed commercially in our time, it is 5-minute reads at maximum, 3-minute reads, 2-minute reads. That's the kind of writing that people are now ready for. That's the kind of writing that people are going to be able to consume on a massive scale, because the reading mostly now is reading is mostly done on smartphones now. And when somebody has a smartphone, they just read something for 3 minutes and then they move on to the next thing. And so when somebody like Nathan John writes a 3-minute read on Substack, in just a few minutes or seconds, it will be read by more people than the people that have read all these books in 1 year. Okay? So that is the kind of world that we live in. There is not much time for reading books. Nobody, very few people are going to devote a month or a week to reading a long book of 1,500 pages. They want something they can read in 5 minutes at maximum. And that is what Substack, Medium, Twitter, or rather X, that is what they provide. They provide those short reads, those things that you can read in about 5 minutes. And I think the most prominent authors of our time, the authors that will be read by very many people in the 21st century, are those who perfect the art of writing short reads, who will perfect the art, or who will write those 5-minute reads that will connect with very many people. Those are the people that will be able to reach hundreds of millions of readers, or billions even of readers in the 21st century. The same way that the likes of Sidney Sheldon reached hundreds of millions of readers with their books, it will be the authors of those short essays that will be able to reach that many people in the 21st century. That is my view, that is my thoughts, and I could be wrong, I could be right, but that is my view. And it's not a view that I picked up today or the other day. It's something that I've been talking about for 15 years now, and there's proof of it because I wrote about it on Facebook, and that post is still there from 2010. All right, so that's what I think. Let me know what you think if you would like to be part of this conversation. Thank you.